The last strategy is the quadratic formula. We have done factoring. We have done extracting the square. We have done completing the square. The last strategy is the quadratic formula. Now, the first thing you want to remember is to always set the equation equal to 0 first, then you can use the quadratic formula. It has to be of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0, then we can use the quadratic formula. Here is the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Please remember this formula. You will need it for your future math classes. A very important formula to remember. Now in question 1, we have it set in the correct form. It's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So we know this is going to require the quadratic formula. A is equal to 1. The leading number in front of the x is 1. B is equal to negative 6. C is equal to 8. We have x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 8. Again, I'm just plugging it into the formula, letter by letter. Divide that by 2 times a, which is 2 times 1. Now we have x is equal to, the negative 6 becomes a plus. So we have plus 6 here, plus or minus the square root. And now I like to enter this part into a calculator. We know negative 6 squared is 36. So that's 36 minus 32 divided by 2. Now what's 36 minus 32? That's 4. So I have x equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 4 divided by 2. And the square root of 4 is 2, so that's x equals 6 plus or minus 2 divided by 2. And we do have two answers. I'll do the subtraction first. That's 6 minus 2, so 4 divided by 2. My first answer is 2. Do it again, this time with the addition. 8 divided by 2, that's 4. So we get two answers, x equals 2 or x equals 4. Now, I want you to be careful. Don't always use the quadratic formula. That's your last option. In my opinion, you should always try to factor first. So if I look at this question, I could have just said, hey, this factors as negative 2 and negative 4. Set both of these equal to 0. X minus 2 equals 0. X minus 4 equals 0. We have x equals 2 and x equals 4. Exactly the same answer, but we did it a lot faster by factoring. So if you have the opportunity, factor first. If it doesn't factor, then try something else. But factoring is the top priority for these types of questions. Example 2, I cannot use the quadratic formula. We'll add 3 to both sides. Now remember, you want to try to factor if possible first, and if you can't factor, then do something else. In this case, this question is not factorable, so we're going to have to use the quadratic formula. A is equal to 3. B is equal to 8. C is equal to 3. So let's plug it into the formula now. We have x equals negative b, which is 8. B is 8. Don't forget the negative in the front. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is 3. Let's divide that by 2 times 3. Now we can bring out our calculators and try to simplify this. The -8 in the front just comes down. Plus or minus the square root of 64, and then we'll do 4 times 3 times 3. That's -36. Divide this by 2 times 3, which is 6. I can simplify this as x equals -8 plus or minus the square root of 28. 64 minus 36 is 28. Divide that by 6. Now, don't simplify the terms yet. Simplify the radical first. I have x equals -8 plus or minus the square root. I know 28 is 2 times 2 times 7. So let's take out that 2 to the front of the radical. We have x equals -8 plus or minus 2 root 7 all over 6. This is not a good enough answer. Look at it carefully. We have the 8, the 2, and the 6 can all be divided by 2. So divide those terms by 2. I get x equals -4 plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is just 1, so we'll leave that blank, and we'll divide that by 3. So this is it. -4 plus or minus the square root of 7 divided by 3. So this question was the perfect opportunity to use the quadratic formula. We could not have done it any other way. Example 3, let's add the 5. Remember, we want to set this equal to 0 first. And now we can use the quadratic formula. We have a equals 1, there is an invisible 1 in front, b equals -4, and c equals 5. So here I have x equals -4, b is -4, plus or minus the square root, b squared, which is -4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, c is 5. Divide that by 2 times a, which is 1. Now be careful, make sure that fraction is going all the way up to that equal sign. Okay, some people make the mistake of just putting it underneath the radical. Don't do that. This is 4 plus or minus the square root. I have 16 here, that's -4 squared is 16, minus 20 over 2. We have 4 plus or minus the square root. That's -4 inside. Now a lot of people might feel tempted. Let's cancel 4, 2, and 4. Nope, can't do that. This one's in the radical. So you have to simplify first. This is 4 plus or minus square root of -4, that's 2i. Now I can simplify. Each of these has a common factor of 2. So let's divide each of these by 2 and we'll get our answer. That implies x equals 2 plus or minus I. I don't need to divide it by 1 because that is more simplified. So we'll leave it as 2 plus or minus I. Question number 4. A lot of people might feel tempted. A equals 1/2. B equals -1. C equals 1/3. You can do this and you will get the right answer, no problems, but it's a lot harder to deal with. I would rather get rid of all of these fractions. Looking at the denominator, I know the LCD is equal to 6. So I can multiply everything by 6 to get rid of those fractions. So let's do 6 times every single one of the terms. So this gives me 6 times 1/2 x squared is actually 3x squared minus 6x plus 2 equals 0. Now I could use the quadratic formula. A equals 3, B equals -6, and C equals 2. It's a lot easier to do now since I don't have any fractions. So let's use the formula. X equals -b be plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times 3 times 2 over 2 times 3. Again, check my work, make sure it's correct. X equals 6 plus or minus. We have negative 6 squared is 36 minus 24 divided by 6. X equals 6 plus or minus the square root. 36 minus 24 is 12, and we're almost done. Again, don't feel tempted to cancel anything out yet. To reduce those radicals, I can rewrite 12 as 2 times 2 times 3. Then we can bring out the 2 to the front. That's 6 plus or minus 2 root 3 over 6. Now let's simplify this. This is all divisible by 2. We have 3 plus or minus root 3 over 3. Can you simplify it any further? No, you can't. Stop here. Don't feel tempted to reduce the 3 and the 3. This one's in the radical. Can't do that. We have to stop. This is a good solution. Don't feel tempted to reduce. In example 5, we can say A equals negative 2, B equals 11, C equals 6. That's perfectly fine. But I hate these negatives in the front. So what I like to do is I like to multiply everything by a negative 1. Or you could divide everything by negative 1 and you'll get the same result. I get 2x squared minus 11x minus 6 equals 0. Then I can say A equals 2, B equals negative 11, and C equals negative 6. Now the quadratic formula is a lot easier to do now since we have negative 11 plus or minus the square root, negative 11 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 6 divided by 2 times 2. It's just easier when the leading coefficient is positive. So let's simplify this. This is positive 11 here, plus or minus the square root. This is 121 minus, oh actually it's a plus since there's two negatives, plus 48 divided by 4. And this gives us 11 plus or minus the square root 169 over 4. Now don't stop here, we got to try to simplify this square root. That's just the square root of 169 over 13. And finally we can break this into two equations. We have 11 minus 13 over 4 is 1, or 11 plus 13 divided by 4. So the first solution is negative 1/2 when you do the work, and the other one is equivalent to 6. So we have two solutions, x equals negative 1/2 and x equals 6.